Welcome, everyone. This is the American Juche Study Group. My name is Noah Shank, and I'm the founder of the American Juche Study Group. I'm a Korean American and an anti-imperialist activist, and I'm also the editor of this new text, Juche for American Workers, Volume 1, which compiles the writing of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-Il, and will be the text used for our weekly study sessions. The American Juche Study Group is a broad initiative, including people of all races, religious backgrounds, and political affiliations, who are interested in learning the ideology of the Korean Revolution. We bring with us a spirit of intellectual charity and goodwill towards all of humankind. We refuse to accept the hateful caricature of North Korea represented in American media, and instead want to learn the ideas that have held the DPRK together for so long and enabled it to withstand circumstances that would most certainly cause any other government on earth to fall. We come with open minds and diversity of thought. We share one goal: peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula in the context of a world without war and poverty, in which every nation is enabled to grow and thrive to its fullest potential. We ask, if you are studying with us today, if you could please send a small $5 contribution to support our work. We understand times are tough right now for everybody, especially with inflation and gas prices, etc. But funds are needed to maintain the important work that we do towards peace and development around the world. So please help us out by going to the link below and sending us $5 directly. So there we go. So yeah, so why don't we get started with the study session? We're going to be today we're going to be working on chapter 2, which is it's called "Our Revolution is the Revolution of Juche," or sorry, "Ours is the Socialism of Juche." And it's a text by Kim Il-sung. It was delivered in 1994 before a group of former heads of state and government officials from around the world. So why don't we start with the context of this? So with this essay, it's sort of interesting. I sort of like to approach it. Caleb actually taught me this about what is to be done. So for what is to be done, he gave me the advice that you should always be reading it backwards, or you should try to read it backwards, because it starts with a very small argument and then expands outward. And this is sort of similar, this essay. It's like, the beginning of the essay, he's just sort of being like, isn't North Korea so great? But the end of the essay, he talks about, international stances of the Korean people, why it is that their revolution has been able to achieve what it does, sort of what is guiding them, mistakes that they've made, and as well as sort of cultural aspects of the Korean people. So, like, what is the context of this essay being written, or of this speech being given by Kim Il-sung? So it's the arduous March period. So the Soviet Union had collapsed, and North Korea had lost its main trading partner. The DPRK had worked to develop food independence. They'd worked really hard on that, in spite of the fact that the northern half of the Korean Peninsula is traditionally not where most of the food is grown. Most of the food is traditionally grown in the south. The north tended to be where more mining or industry was. Most of the industry, which had mostly been creating weapons for the Japanese imperialists, had been destroyed during the Korean War and the bombing campaigns by the United States and UN forces. After which they had to rebuild from nothing. But the northern half of the Korean Peninsula is very mountainous. It's hard to grow crops. And in spite of that, the DPRK, because they valued their sovereignty and their independence, and they didn't want to have to be reliant on foreign aid, worked very hard to develop food independence and food security for their people. But they were still reliant on Russian oil to run that machinery. And when the Soviet Union no longer existed and was no longer able to sell them oil, they were in a tough spot. And in addition to that, Western countries began to tighten the screws and increase sanctions. So if you could, next slide, please. So he says, there are no nuclear weapons. This is on page 20. There is no nuclear weapon in our country, and there will be no nuclear weapons in the future too. We do not want to be a military power. After reunification of our country will not become a satellite of any nation. He continues, our country's neighbors, such big countries as Russia and China and Japan, but she will be an independent, sovereign, and neutral state, which is not a satellite of any other nation. which is interesting because all that we ever learn about the DPRK in American media, all that we are ever taught about them is that they're a country that has nuclear weapons that want to kill us. But actually, they didn't want to have nuclear weapons, and it was their official position that they were very proud that Korea is a very peaceful country. You have to keep in mind, Korea is the second oldest civilization on the face of the planet. It's 4,000 years old. I mean, they lost to China by a little bit, about 1,000 years younger. But in spite of that, Korea is the only civilization with such an old history to have never started a war of aggression with any country ever. Unless you count invading themselves during the Korean War, which I don't. Um, the DPRK has never started a war, and the Korean people have never started a war of aggression. They've never held another country in captivity, and they've existed for 4,000 years, and that's a huge part of the Korean identity. Um, so, what are the circumstances under which they were forced to acquire nuclear weapons? Um, so, next slide, please. So it's the 1990s, and times are really, really tough in North Korea. And over and over and over again, the Western media is claiming. This should sound familiar to some people, but the American media, the U.S. media, is repeatedly claiming that the DPRK wants to get weapons of mass destruction, that the nuclear facilities that they have are not being properly monitored by the IAEA, without much evidence, and that they're enriching uranium to try and get a nuclear weapon. And this is the justification to increase sanctions on them as their people are already starving. And so at that time, it's the 90s, and the Clinton administration is able to sort of work out a deal with Kim Jong-Il, who was the head of state at the time, because Kim Il-sung, he was still alive, but he was quite elderly and frail. He was in no position to be the head of state, so he was sort of a ceremonial sort of official. They were able to broker a deal in which some sanctions would be lifted, and the DPRK would be able to get aid in the form of food. Like, food would be able to be delivered to the Korean people, and in exchange, they would agree to not have a nuclear weapon, and that they would give up some of their uranium enrichment. And that was the official position of the Korean people. They didn't want to have a nuclear weapon. But then, yeah, next slide, please. You know, so Republicans had been holding up the aid actually ever being delivered to the DPRK. They held it up in the Senate. Aid was never actually delivered, but there was this agreement on paper that, yeah, at some point you guys are going to get aid. And then Bush comes into office, and he says, well, the North Koreans didn't really honor the agreement, and we're not going to deliver any aid. He rips up the deal. And then in 2002, right after Bush invades Iraq, he gives a speech in which he talks about the axis of evil, and he says that the axis of evil includes Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, and these are all countries that were really concerned could develop weapons of mass destruction. And it was under these circumstances that the DPRK decided that they had no other choice to secure their sovereignty than to violate the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and to develop nuclear weapons. So at this point, I'd like to open it up a little bit toward discussion. Because this actually, I mean, with everything going on in the world at the time, this essay actually seems rather timely. It reminds me a lot of what was going on with the Iran nuclear deal and sort of divisions in the ruling class about how to deal with these sort of countries. So, like, why do you think it was that, like, mainstream media seemed like they wanted North Korea to be the bad guy, like they wanted them to have nuclear weapons? Folks have any thoughts on that? Any comments?
Well, there are some incredible parallels right now with Iran, where Iran never wanted a nuclear weapon. Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, but um, because of the USA, Babylon USA, I call it, um, ripping up the deal, they're being pushed toward, the possibility of having a nuclear weapon.
Right, and actually, it's quite interesting. It speaks to, like, sort of a difference in strategy, I guess you can say, as well, because you got to like the context in which this is happening. It's the 1990s, and what is the United States sort of doing around the world at this time? They're sort of organizing color revolutions to try and bring market reforms to former communist countries, right? And China has had its reform and opening up. They had that in the 70s. Perestroika, and the collapse of the Soviet Union has happened. The free market, sort of policy have been forced on the Eastern Bloc and on former communist countries. And it seemed like there was factions within the Democratic Party that may have wanted something like that, or felt that something like that could happen with the DPRK. And I mean, there's been a lot of talk about some people have said that Kim Jong-Un, he wants to be sort of he wants to be like the Deng Xiaoping of North Korea. Well, actually, if you read this essay, I mean, it's pretty clear that the North Koreans have always been open to, or at least in the 90s, they were very open to foreign investment and very open to cooperation with the West. But they were very clear that it had to be on their terms.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to point out also part of what was going on and may have complicated the aid not getting through was that South Korea was having its sunshine policy in the 1990s. South Korea was becoming very, very friendly to North Korea during these years. And South Korea had built up a rather strong economy in the 70s and 80s. And I think there was a feeling on the part of the United States that South Korea's economy was becoming strong and becoming a competitor. And that it wasn't simply a matter of wanting to hurt North Korea. It was also seeing South Korea as a competitor and not appreciating how South Korea was becoming so friendly to North Korea. And that may have been a factor. The other thing is, my understanding is they did get some aid at the beginning, and then Congress cut off the funding for the deal, right? That Congress wouldn't fund it further. But initially there was some aid when the Clinton administration made the deal in 1994. And then the Republicans in Congress wouldn't fund it after that. That was my understanding of how it went down. And also the other thing that I just wanted to mention is many people, I'm not a legal scholar. I don't know. My understanding is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, you are allowed to withdraw. And that's what makes the way North Korea has been demonized for withdrawing. Technically, if you read it, a country does have the right to leave. Is that true or not? Is that just one interpretation, or because it seems like the way the international community treats it, you don't have the right to leave the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But I've heard people say you actually do. So I wondered if anyone knew anything about that.
Well, I'm not a legal scholar either. I wouldn't know. I'm sorry, my family has dogs. It's very, but I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, there was. It seems to me like there was a feeling by certain, by certain groupings that they wanted to have sort of, they wanted North Korea to be another Soviet Union or something like that, and that other elements, the military-industrial complex, et cetera, they didn't really feel comfortable with something like that. And then North Korea also, they wanted it to be sort of on their terms. And you are right that South Korea had they created the 5 super major state-run monopolies, basically Samsung, Hyundai, the steel company, I forget what it's called, and a few others. Yeah, and that's if you look at media from the 80s, they're constantly talking about how Japan is killing us, right? If you watch the old Back to the Future movies, right, the dad has 2 ties and they're the rising suns, right? And there was very much a fear in the late 80s and the 90s as the Asian target markets expanded, that the Asian tiger markets were going to overtake the United States, that we had created this monster that was going to overtake our economy, and that the problem with the U.S. is that we just have too many rights and we're too nice to people, right? And that we need a military dictator like Park Chung-hee. We need a military dictator like they have in Singapore, and that through that, if we're just really mean to people, then they'll work harder, and then we can have a strong economy like the Asian tiger markets. And of course, you had they made it impossible for North Korea really to do business with South Korea in the 90s during the Sunshine Policy. And then, of course, George Soros and others pulled their money out of the intentionally, like, did a rug pull on the Asian tiger markets and crashed those economies, and they haven't really recovered in the same way since.
Can I bring up something?
Yeah, you can, of course, Ed.
My name's Ed Poor. I'm a member of the Unification Church, and Reverend Moon, way back 30 years ago, he tried something, a private initiative. He wanted to actually make friends with Kim Il-sung and forget about the six-party talks and how there's interlocking things where you can only do this if we do that, and it's like he bypassed South Korea and ignored the United States, and he just went to North Korea, gave Kim Il-sung a big hug, and then he actually invested. He invested church funds in North Korea. He created a business, and he said, "I'm just donating this to North Korea, try to get the ball going." And I think some cases, like governments like say, "Oh, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Why are you taking the initiative?" Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah. I mean, Reverend Sun Myung Moon was very heroic in his initiative being taken to foster friendship between the people of Korea and for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And in doing so, he angered a lot of people. You had Korea Gate, right, in the late 70s, during which Reverend Sun Myung Moon was, put in prison on a I don't know. Am I allowed to swear? Bullshit charge, and that was likely for his work related to this, and that he had a sphere of his own, and he had interests of his own that some certain forces maybe didn't appreciate, but that were really interesting. I mean, and I think that spirit of wanting friendship and cooperation, I mean, it continued in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula for many years afterwards. And I mean, recently they've sort of pulled away from that, but that was after being slapped in the face repeatedly. It was made very clear to the North Koreans that the United States was not engaging with them in good faith, and under those circumstances, and under the circumstances of the rising BRICS economy, they sort of feel like, well, maybe they don't have to play ball with the Americans anymore. And that's unfortunate for us as Americans, because I would like there to be more dialogue and more more friendship and talk between the countries. So I think, unless anybody has any more comments, I think we can move on to the next slide.
Yeah, I do, because speaking about the Korean famine, it happens to be a fact that the United States had weather warfare towers and in place. And the question is, there was this famine in North Korea because it didn't rain. And how much of this was caused potentially from some kind of weather warfare on behalf of the United States? Because, for example, when Poland fell, there were major protests, and the United States used weather warfare to create rain. So while people were protesting, it was raining very, very heavily. And supposedly that wasn't enough, and then the United States brought on its mind control weaponry to make people so depressed that they eventually left and stopped protesting to save socialism in Poland. So was there talk about the fact that the United States might have been engaged in weather warfare in North Korea at that time? Because right now, isn't that what was happening in Iran? It wasn't raining, and that was because of the United States using its weather warfare technology.
Well, I will say nothing would surprise me at this point. I mean, for a long time they were saying, cloud seeding and chemtrails, that was a conspiracy theory, and now we're having reports saying, well, actually, there is more truth to it. I mean, anytime something is brought up as a crazy conspiracy theory, it feels like you find out 6 months later, actually, it's kind of true. But so it wouldn't shock me. But Ed
Yeah.
actually made a really good point in the chat. He was talking about how Reverend Sun Young Moon actually founded North Korea's car company in the late 1990s. I mean, Ed, would you want to talk about that a little more as a member of the Unification Church? Oh, you're muted. You have to unmute.
You got to unmute it.
In 30 seconds. It was a gift. It was just a giveaway. It's like, how do you break the log jam? You know how, like, after World War II, the United States rebuilt Europe and also heavily invested in helping Japan. Even capitalists came over and showed them how to improve quality. There was C. Edwards Deming, for example. So Reverend Sun Myung Moon just decided, I'm going to create a car assembly plant, and just as a gift to North Korea, kind of like a jump start. I don't really know all the details, and
Yeah.
go quickly. So
I think that what Pastor Moon did there is very moving, because as Americans, it's often hard for us to understand, well, why would you do something without a return on investment? But that's there's a lot to be said for the rights of the people. So there you go.
Well, I wanted to add something related to what Jessica said. I'm curious to learn more about weather issues and such. One thing that I have heard is that the border between North Korea and China is open, and that there were people on the Chinese side, and it's not known who they were, but people assume they were tied to the United States, that were giving North Koreans money if they killed cows in North Korea and brought them like the tail of a dead cow. And there was like a cash bonus. So there were a lot of like North Koreans who, because there was a food shortage, were going over into China to get food. And then they would meet these people that said, oh, we'll give you a lot of money if you kill a cow. And that reduced the amount of cattle in the country. Is that what was happening? You might know more about that.
I've seen that. There was a claim about that in the documentary. I think the PSL made it. Maybe I don't know who made it. It was loyal citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul, and they talk about how some of them had gone over the border into China, and they were being offered the tail of an ox, and I guess the tail of an ox helps an ox balance. So if an ox loses its tail, that it basically becomes disabled. It's unable to pull whatever you would need to do farming and stuff like that, to carry things, and so it just becomes like this useless dead weight, and that contributed to the food insecurity. That's the claim that I've heard made. It wasn't that you kill the cow; it's that you basically disable it, and it becomes this like useless thing you have to feed.
Interesting.
I guess it would be too obvious if they were killing a bunch of oxen, so they disabled them. That's unfortunately, as most of us know, just pretty typical of the dirty tricks of the empire.
I just want to add, look, the United States paid Ukrainians to do that during the famine in the 1930s. I actually knew Ukrainian collaborators because I lived right next door, right across the street from the Ukrainian Catholic Church, and they were proud to say that they got money to burn crops and kill cattle, and that's why they had to come to the United States. They were war criminals.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt. I guess I just kind of joined. Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yep. We can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was even going to mention. My name's Wes, by the way. Kind of like I believe it was who mentioned the Ukrainians with the burning of the fields and the killing of the cattle.
That was Jessica.
Okay, that was Jessica. Well, even in our own country today, and I know Caleb has talked a lot about the Malthusianism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We're having these bizarre facilities, just blowing up, and mass killings of cattle, ticks showing up in these boxes. We're seeing some very strange things happening that are obviously being engineered on purpose.
Well, even like things that are well documented historical facts. like during the Great Depression. I mean, a common talking point against the Soviet Union when it comes to the famine that occurred within the 1930s is, oh well, the famine must have been intentional because they were exporting grain. And it's like, yeah, they were exporting grain to buy tractors so that there wouldn't be another famine. But in the United States, we had a famine too. We just didn't call it a famine. We called it the Dust Bowl. And during the Dust Bowl, where crops really couldn't grow throughout much of the Midwest, you had a mass, migration crisis. People were fleeing, trying to get to California, trying to get jobs. Thousands of people were starving in the streets, and the United States government was destroying crops. I mean, so that farmers wouldn't go under. They were, you hear stories. They talk about it in R. Palm Dutt's Fascism and Social Revolution. How, the U.S. government would buy cattle and they would kill the cattle and then they would throw it in a hole and pour lime over it so that nobody could eat it. That they would burn crops, and this was all to keep prices high enough to sustain the market. So food manipulation, Malthusian economics, what they call reverse inflation, things that they do now with interest rates within the Federal Reserve. It's all, it's ways to drive down living standards, and it's sort of it's the United States bringing home what is done. That's what fascism is. It's the degrowth policies that are imposed on the people of the global South being brought home, I guess you could say. So.
I will add that Stalin. Just a moment. I will add that Stalin and the Soviet Union did drastically reduce exports of grain, but like you said, they couldn't stop them all the way because they had to have some revenue coming in for the people. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, no one talks about the fact that 3 to 7 million people starved to death in the United States. You can clearly see this in the census figures in the United States. And speaking about Malthusianism, I mean, look, the United States could have used that money to subsidize, right, food. Instead of paying to bury these pigs and these cows alive, they could have used that money to subsidize food. Right? That's what the food stamp program is. Keeps the food prices high because it subsidizes, actually, not the poor, but the farmers. And also
Right.
manufacturing.
And Walmart.
And then there's obviously the case of poisoned food, where the food on purpose is deliberately designed to lack the nutritional density that it would traditionally have if grown in a more normal sort of way. Obviously there was a deregulation, I think, of was it glyphosate recently?
Yeah, one thing that I've heard from people who visited North Korea is that acne doesn't exist in North Korea. Like, it just doesn't exist. They will see, buses and buses of teenagers, and none of them will have any acne. And that's related to the food there, that, Western food has so many chemicals in it. Noah's saying that's not the case, but
Koreans don't get acne anyway, Caleb. Koreans.
Oh, really?
Koreans tend to have very clear skin because they have thicker dermises on average and more resilient. And also skincare routines are very common. I mean, in South Korea too, you won't see people with acne.
So. Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. All right.
But, it might be the food. The food probably contributes to diet is also an important part. But yeah, Koreans don't get acne.
There you go.
I have a question, if I may, Noah.
Sure.
Okay. The first question is, do you know if the U.S. Travel sanctions are still in effect? And number two, if you know of, or if it's true, that in violation of the international humanitarian law, that the U.S. is preventing North Korea from importing various different types of medical equipment and food needs. Have you heard anything like that, or?
Well, the travel ban is still in effect for the DPRK, unfortunately. It is illegal to go there under a U.S. passport. I mean, if you're a U.S. citizen, there are loopholes. Like if you have a passport with another country, you could travel on that passport. Not that I'm telling you to do that, but that is something that you could do hypothetically. Um, and as far as sanctions being in violation, I mean, all sanctions are really, the United States likes to act like sanctions are like this magic tool that only affects the rulers of nations or whatever. But what they really are is it's economic warfare. That basically the idea is that you make these people suffer, you make their lives difficult. You make it difficult for them to feed their families. You make it difficult for them to seek medical treatment. You make it difficult for them to travel, and that eventually they'll get mad at the people who are running their country, and that they'll overthrow them. And it's criminal and it's illegal. I mean, but that's the policy that we have. I mean, the sanctions against Cuba and the embargo against Cuba, is genocidal. The sanctions that were imposed on North Korea in the '90s were genocidal. And that you can say, oh, well, we're not targeting medical aid directly, but the reality of the situation is that a medical company is not going to sell to them because they know that in the future they're not going to be able to buy or sell goods in the United States. And who do you think has a bigger market, North Korea or the United States, which is the wealthiest country in the world?
Yeah, and
Well,
sanctions have never.
I'm sorry. There's actually, I saw it on YouTube and a couple of other places where the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is saying that they tried to send humanitarian aid to Cuba, but that Cuba refused it. So I don't know, what
I doubt
that's
that's
all
true.
about, but yeah.
It doesn't sound that different from what they did to Syria. I mean, it's pretty much the same strategy. They always use it, but it's very similar to what happened to Syria. And I mean, we could look at what the case is in Syria right now, which is, they had a total regime change.
Right.
Yeah, they went from a non-sectarian government, to a terrorist government.
It's
very
true, and it's
sad.
very sad. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So as I was saying, I mean, there is indications from Kim Il Sung that they wanted to have something akin to a reform and opening up. He says, "quote This is page. I'm sorry, I think it was like 23, maybe. It's page 23. Yeah, it's the last paragraph. You asked if we have any intentions to open our doors to as other countries do. We have already opened our doors. In the economic field, we welcome joint ventures and collaboration with other countries, allow foreign investment, and create free economic and trade zones. Operating doors is not a special measure. If foreigners can enter our country freely for economic activities, it means opening doors. I consider our open door policy as the best policy. We open doors in our own way. I hate imitating other countries. I would persuade other officials that if there is something to learn from other countries, they could learn, but they should not swallow it whole. That they should chew it first, and if it suits their tastes, they can swallow it. But if not, they should spit it out. And if they swallow what does not suit their taste, they may suffer indigestion. It's a very folksy way of saying, that what Kim Il Sung was saying was that they want to hold on to the socialist aspect of their economy, but that they want to introduce market reforms. I mean, he was saying this in the '90s. I mean, nobody except for China and maybe Vietnam were saying this at the time, but it was an indication that the world was changing. And we have this image of North Korea in our heads as like they're very rigid, right? They're the last Marxist-Leninist country in the world. Although in this essay, even he says we're not Marxist-Leninists. We consider our ideology to be Juche, which is higher than Marxism-Leninism and is adapted to the conditions and the spirit of the Korean people. And that the DPRK at that time was interested in receiving foreign investment, and that was partially because of the horrific conditions of the arduous march, but it was also because they recognized that the world was changing. I mean, the DPRK remained neutral during the Sino-Soviet split. They were really neither on Moscow's side nor Beijing's side, nor on the U.S.'s side. They sort of remained, in a gray area, sort of similar to Cuba, where they traded with both, and the Koreans are a very adaptive people, and I think as well with interactions with with the Koreans in the South and seeing what foreign investment can do for a country with the so-called Korean economic miracle, with all the capital that was infused in there, and the tremendous mineral resources and labor power that the Korean people have. I think that they made the calculation that Korea could be very, very wealthy and very prosperous. Should they introduce market reforms and ask for foreign investment? But they were also making it clear at the time that they want to keep their socialist system. The socialist system is good. They had he in the beginning he talks about how they've abolished unemployment and they've abolished taxation. Right? They don't have any taxes in North Korea because if you work in North Korea, chances are you're working for a state-run industry, and that state-run industry is generating revenue for the government. I mean, do you imagine if you had
communism is taxes? That's what communism is when you pay your taxes. Haven't you watched Fox News?
Right, that's what AOC told me too. She said, "Tax the rich." That's what socialism is. Socialism is when you have a bajillion gazillion tax, and that gives people free stuff. That's why in North Korea, that proves North Korea is not really communist, and that AOC knows what communism is because they abolish taxes, and that proves they're a monarchy and they're backward.
Hey, look, I got like 18 taxes on my phone bill. That must be communism.
Yeah, and I mean, that's it flies in the face. There's a lot in this essay that flies in the face of everything we've been told about communism, and we'll go into that a little bit later because, I have the next two slides will sort of get into this, but yeah, next slide. Yeah, so the next slide is in our country, rice has been called royal rice or Rhee's rice because only royal families ate it under the Rhee dynasty. At present, we are working hard to supply enough rice to all the people. So that was page 30. It's 20 something is what. I'm sorry, I forgot to add page numbers. That's page 16. He talks about how living on rice, meat, and meat soup in tiled roof houses, wearing silk clothes, is a century-old desire of our people. Our party is working hard to realize this desire of the people. What is most important is realizing this desire is to ensure that people live on rice. In our country, rice has long been called royal rice or Rhee's rice because only royal families ate rice from the Rhee dynasty, and we're working really hard to ensure that. If we need for food is to be satisfied in our country, we must produce more than 10 million tons more grain. What is important is increasing agricultural production, is to complete irrigation, electrification, and mechanization of the rural economy, and to make proper use of chemicals. Irrigation is particularly important in this regard. And then he talks a little bit about how certain rivers don't flood at certain times, and that makes it really hard to grow rice in North Korea and stuff like that. But what he's really saying here is, next slide, please. He's saying in a very Korean way that poverty is not socialism, but to be rich is glorious. If what we were being taught about socialism was true, and that socialism was about taxes, socialism was about redistribution of wealth, socialism is about making sure everyone's equal, then if all Kim Il Sung had done was redistribute wealth, then he would be saying, well, nobody should we should abolish rice eaters, no rice eating in North Korea because rice is a bourgeois decadence, and the idea that you should want to live comfortably and wear silk and live in a tiled apartment and be able to eat rice and meat. I mean, this is clearly shows that you have been infected with a bourgeois disease, and that you want to be wealthy, and everybody knows that making money and being wealthy is bad. And he says, no, actually, we want to be a wealthier country, and we want to make sure that those desires that people have to be wealthier and to feel secure are fulfilled. And we have to do that by fulfilling certain state-run metrics within our economy. I mean, this is very the complete opposite, in my opinion, of everything we're taught about North Korea. I mean, I'm going to open the floor a little bit to comment. Do people?
One thing that I find fascinating about this, and I don't come to this from a communist background. I'm not a communist. I don't even have a leftist background at all. But I really do appreciate Kayla Maupin's research, and a lot of my understanding of economics has come from Caleb Maupin, and from watching these live streams and what have you. And so I really have to thank you guys for that, especially you, Caleb. And in fact, Jessica, I might know you. Are you in North Jersey? Hands off Syria, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we know each other. Yeah, we actually do. We used to correspond, which is very interesting. So, but I come at this mainly from someone who comes from I guess you could call the right, and I would consider myself a kind of a nationalist. But I think in North Korea and in countries like Syria and Libya and a lot of these socialist countries, that's the model for how do you get a kind of national unity and a sort of economic system that would benefit the people of the United States. And I would have to agree that that is the model. And when I see like North Korea or the People's Republic of China, I think that's a workable model. I don't understand why anyone would be against it. It blows my mind.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of effort to lie about them, but if you actually read what they say and you look at what they've done and you look at the evidence objectively, like it seems like you have. I mean, I wouldn't want to say that I would want to live. I mean, at the same economic. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Like, no, the DPRK is not a super wealthy country, especially compared to the United States. Their living standard is a fair bit lower. But if you talk
Oh
about
no, I
quality,
understand that because of the sanctions and a lot of other things. But one thing the DPRK has, which the U.S. does not have, America's a very alienated country. Americans don't treat their neighbor right. I'm a born again Christian. I go to an independent Baptist church, and I believe in the Bible and I believe in the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. And the Holy Spirit makes me want to love my neighbor and care about my fellow man. And that should actually be. It's ultimately through the Holy Spirit you can get that power, but even someone who's just a natural man who doesn't have the Holy Spirit can understand the basic. The Bible talks about that there would come a time when men would have no natural affections. And we're losing natural affection in the United States. They haven't lost it in North Korea. They still have natural affection. They still have natural affection in Syria or Russia and China. But in America, we've completely lost that. And when I see North Korea and some of their ideas of Juche and Songon and some of those concepts, I can see a model of what Americans need something like that.
Yeah, the antidote to how we are being taught to hate our neighbors and blame them. Go ahead, Jessica.
I just want to say I was watching this video, I think it was a year or two ago, and it was about it was in Pyongyang in the capital, and they're watching on a big screen some South Korean K-pop, and you can see the faces of the people and how disgusted they are. And some people are coming back with signs protesting, and they found it to be very misogynistic and very negative. And I thought, wow, that's really impressive because Americans watch like Little Nas X promoting Satanism and Cardi B, and no one says anything. And here were North Korean people just really upset and disgusted by the sexism in K-pop, South Korean K-pop.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I wrote an article. I haven't published it yet, but I wrote it about if America wants the blessings of God upon it, and I believe in the doctrine of Anglo-Israelism. I believe in the Anglo-Israel message. Now, that doesn't mean I hate other people or anything like that. But one thing I wrote in that article is if we don't repent of our national sins as Celto-Saxon people, God is not going to bless our people. And one of our national sins was the mistreatment of the stranger, because the law that God gave to those of us who were Israelites was that we would treat the stranger right. And, it was wrong, like things like the Indian Removal Act. Those things were wrong. They don't agree with the law of God. Now, I believe in theonomy, and some of you might know what theonomy is. That's the law of God. I believe in biblical law. But I do not hold to the Gary North, because Gary North took like Austrian laissez-faire capitalism and then tried to mix it with biblical law, and that's completely ridiculous, because if you read the Bible and the economic system it prescribes, you have things like an abolition of debt through a jubilee year. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. And there's caring for the poor. It's a form of socialism for the Israelite people. You know, and you could even say a form of I got to be careful how I say it, because there's some people who would misquote this. Social nationalism, like it's for the nation, but it's socialism. And I don't mean what people think, because I know there's some idiots out there that would assume some, idiot mustache guy. I'm not talking about that. But the fact that the resources of the nation belong to those people who are in that land, the resources of the nation, and that the people of that nation share those resources, and that there is a respect of property, but there's also a respect of the general well-being and good of society as a whole.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just gonna comment real quickly on the K-pop comment that Jessica made. Yeah, the K-pop industry is wildly exploitative. I mean, you read some of the stories, and also it's like this, like South Koreans have this like weird obsession with like adopting Western beauty standards to the point where it's like sick and twisted. I mean, South Korea is like one of the plastic surgery capitals of the world because of how unrealistic like the beauty standard for men and women. Um, you know, um, People they'll bleach their skin, like just ridiculous stuff, trying to adopt westernized beauty standards. I mean, it's really not a healthy industry, and it's a sickness that has been imported to Korea by Western powers. I'd like to get a little bit back to the class and the point I was making about to be rich is glorious. I mean, and sort of what the genius of what Kim Il Sung is doing with like talking about like something basic like people should be able to eat rice, because for a long time it was very aspirational to have rice, right? To be able to eat rice, because it was something that during the Rhee dynasty, by which he means the Chosun dynasty. So I guess so in South Korean scholarship, and in most scholarship, you would call it the Chosun dynasty. That's a period. It's after the Goryeo dynasty, and it's after the Mongol invasion. A gentleman by the name of General Yi, he seizes power, and he creates a golden age. A golden age for Korean culture. He creates the Korean written language, and this period happens from like the 1300s all the way up until the Japanese occupation in 1910. But what in North Korea they would call it the Rhee dynasty, because they want to emphasize its semi-feudal nature. And they want to emphasize that they don't want to go back to it, and that there are things about it that you could admire, but that it was a feudal society ruled by the Rhee family. So there's that. But as far as like, this is something very basic, and this is something that you should always be thinking about when you talk about, political advocacy in a country. It's like, what is something that is very simple? What is something that is very simple that speaks to a truth, or something that people understand deeply? I mean, why is it that we have lawns in the United States of America? When the guy who founded the Muslim Brotherhood came to the United States, right? One of the things, he was so astonished by how prideful Americans are about their lawns, about keeping their lawns, tending to their lawns, etc. Like, why is it that Americans have lawns? Well, that's because in 18th and 19th century Europe, rich people who owned mansions and castles, people from the aristocracy, would make it a habit of having private gardens and little plots of land where they would pretend that it was like an area that a peasant would have, like a small plot of land that was dedicated to just nothing, right? And that was a statement that wealthy people were making, is that I am so wealthy that I can have a plot of land that I use for nothing but growing this useless crop called grass. And I just have this little plot of land where I grow nothing but grass. And so when the New Deal happened and Americans for the first time are buying homes, especially with the post-World War II economic expansion, you know, there's a lot of criticism of suburban America and the post-World War II economic expansion, in particular by the New Left. And they talk a lot about how lawns are this like horrible, thing where, it's just like Soviet social architecture where like people, everything looks the same and stuff like that. But why is it that Americans had lawns? It was the statement that like we have become such a wealthy country that every man every human being is just as wealthy as as the wealthiest people that existed under feudalism in Europe. Every man a king, like Huey P. Long said. I mean, I think that's what Kim Il Sung was saying too. Every man a king. There will be peace without end. Every neighbor a friend, and every man a king. I mean, and this is something we should adapt. I mean, people talk about you know there should be no billionaires. I mean, we should set our minds to it. What is something that at this time, right, only a billionaire could afford, only the wealthiest people could afford, that we should want every human being to have access to? And that should be the goal of us as socialists, to achieve a society where every human being we have such profound wealth that every human being is as wealthy as what today we consider a billionaire. So I think
everybody should be able to have the freedom and security and options in life that a billionaire has.
Exactly. And people talk about it as hoarding wealth. But that's an arbitrary number that you're assigning, value to, rather than what it means to that person to, to be able to achieve that living standard. And the living standards that happened, hundreds of years ago. We would look at them today with the wealthiest person, in Western Europe in the 1600s. If we lived like they did today, we would consider them to be extremely poor. And this, Caleb's talked about this out in the in the 1600s. Owning a mirror was considered to be this like ridiculous thing, this ridiculous, gaudy thing that only the wealthiest people could own. Could you imagine if socialists had gone around saying, we want to abolish mirrors. We want to abolish mirrors. No mirrors for anybody. It would be ridiculous. So I think we can move on to the next slide, unless
just briefly, there's enough wealth, or there's enough land. We don't need to abolish lawns. There's enough land in the world for every family to have a lawn in Alaska, if I'm not mistaken. And speaking of debunking anti-progress narratives, perhaps you've seen an old LaRouche ad where the cave people are saying no, or not cave people, but the ancient people are saying no wheels, no wheels.
Right. No wheels, no AI, abolish AI. Yeah. No nuclear power. It uses too much water. I love that argument against AI. Oh, it uses so much water, and it's like they don't actually know what the process is through which it's like it's a cooling system based off of compute. And they're like, oh, well, it uses. It's like if you watch 1 hour of Netflix, that's the equivalent of 6,000 computations by ChatGPT. And I'm sure that
Does anybody say abolish Netflix? Maybe because it's imperialist propaganda.
Yeah, or it's because it's threatening to their class position, and the petty bourgeoisie have these like laptop class jobs that they feel threatened by AI. That they feel their class position is threatened by other people, and so they hate ChatGPT. You'll notice. I remember when I was in high school, like I was concerned about automation at the time, and I would say, aren't you guys worried about automation to teachers and stuff like that? And they would say, oh, just learn to code. And yeah, maybe those jobs at the assembly line will go away, but you'll hire all of these people for engineers. And I remember at the time thinking like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what would be the point of getting rid of all of those jobs in the first place if you were going to replace them with people who are being paid more? Wouldn't that drive up the price of goods? But it was just this like, oh, we don't have to think about it because it doesn't threaten our class position yet. But now that it's the professional managerials, the middle class people whose class position and their individuality that's being threatened, and now it's a problem. And that's my thesis on AI panic. But Yeah, the next slide is sorry. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European socialist countries was a result from the fact that bureaucracy was rampant and worships of powers prevailed. If it rained in Moscow, East German people took out umbrellas, even if it was not raining in Berlin. That's Kim Il Sung. Um, and there is a lot of truth in that. I mean, on the one hand, the Soviet social bureaucracy, it was very rigid. It was unable to bend. It was unable to adapt, and it was not really meeting the needs of the people in the ways that they wanted. Although it had many achievements for those people. But yeah, there were a lot of people who were extremely unhappy with the way the security state was being arranged, with the way jobs were being handed out, with frustrations with the bureaucratic management system and feeling like they had no real say in their government, and the fact that the only way to advance in society was to become a member of the party. And that moreover, in a lot of the satellite states, I mean, and this is true of a lot of countries under imperialist rule, more so even than the Eastern Bloc. I mean, there are a lot of countries that don't really have a pull of their own, that they sort of follow the leader and do whatever a great power is saying, and that Kim Il Sung was really repudiating the worship of great powers, and that this is really common among socialists in particular. I mean, you come to understand that socialism is good, or that socialism would help people by studying the systems of these other countries, and then it's very common, and the lies that we've been told about them, and then it's very common to become infatuated with them and to try and copy one to one what those countries are doing and their policy, and become obsessed with a certain leader. And I'm sure all of us, we can think of examples of that happening in our personal lives, people we've interacted with. I mean, I'm just gonna, we can go around. I mean, can people think of like stories of like, instances where, somebody or an organization you can think of was hampered by their like obsession with, a given socialist country, to the point where they weren't really thinking about, how could they improve lives for Americans?
Before we jump into that, let me just briefly read a comment here from Jessica. Yes, rice was a natural desire for people to eat. The desire to have lawns was not a natural desire. It was a product of heavy marketing by public relations firms to force men to spend their Sundays not at church or with their coworkers, but mowing the lawn to certain unhealthy levels. During the pre-World War II period, lawns grew long and wild. They were not cut at 2 inches high.
Yeah, I agree with Jessica there. And also, I think there's a danger in lawns, and this is maybe a different sort of view here, but I think it's actually a national security danger. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but imagine if, an EMP goes off, right? In my opinion, I think every person in this country should be trained from school to how to provide food for themselves, and to be armed. And, I think it would be beneficial for the people as a whole to have, maybe little farms or miniature gardens in the front, maybe instead of a lawn. I think that's probably more practical.
Yeah,
When
I
it comes,
mean,
go ahead.
so we're at time. I don't know if we really have time to really debate lawns. I mean, we're trying to keep these sessions to about an hour, but I think maybe we can end the discussion. I guess we didn't really get into the last question. But yeah, our party is a party of new type, the Revolutionary Party of Juche. To bring friendship with us, you need to have a correct understanding of the socialism of our style. And that's something that the Center for Political Innovation is really trying to do. Again, I'm going to reiterate, if you can afford to, I mean, I know times are tough, but we'd encourage anybody who's watching at home or who has participated in the study session, just donate $5 if they can, or any amount that they can. $1 is any amount. The link to the Buy Me a Coffee will be in the chat. And then I think we can just show, some outreach that is being done around Juche and around peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula to end.
Now, Noah, are we actually kicked at an hour, or can we talk for another minute or two, like on the last question?
I mean, we're 5 minutes over, but I just, I think we have busy schedules and stuff like that. I mean,
fair enough.
But we're doing it next week. This is once a week, so come back next week and bring a friend, right? This is
Absolutely.
Good. Yeah, and who knows? Maybe if this becomes an every week thing, we'll do an extra hours feature or something, right? That would be fun, right? Like a, so there you go.
After hours, yeah, they call them, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to bring my older brother. That'd be cool.
You ever seen this flower?
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, how you doing? You ever seen this flower?
No.
It's called Kim Il Sungya. Find out all about it. Hello. Have you seen this flower? Have you seen this flower?
I think so.
You can't get it in America.
Okay.
It's called Kim Il Sungya.
Oh.
Yeah, North Korea.
Yeah.
It's grown all over North Korea because in 1964, Kim Il-sung went to Indonesia and they were growing this flower, and President Sukarno named it after Kim Il-sung as a symbol of eternal friendship between Indonesia and North Korea.
Okay.
This is Penny Arcos, the regional captain for the Minnesota chapter of Center for Political Innovation. I've been out here at the University of Minnesota passing out these books for a couple hours about the Kim Il-sungya flower. Had a lot of positive reactions. Most people were curious. They don't know much about North Korea, but they were willing to learn. It's called Kim Il-sungya. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it grows all over North Korea. In 1964, Carl Ludwig was growing it in Indonesia, and Kim Il-sung visited Indonesia and saw how beautiful it was. And so Sukarno, the president, decided to name it after Kim Il-sung as a symbol of eternal friendship between Indonesia and North Korea. And shortly after that visit, America overthrew Indonesia. Hello. Have you ever seen this flower?
No.
It's called Kim Il-sungya. CIA gave the information to the military to slaughter thousands of Chinese ethnic people and the supporters of Sukarno, because he had been a populist leader. He built infrastructure and schools and wiped out illiteracy. Obama's mother brought him to Indonesia, where he married his stepfather, and they were part of this slaughter.
What organization is it?
Center for Political Innovation.
All right.
Have you ever heard of it?
Left wing, center, right wing.
Well, we are innovationists, so we don't claim left wing, right. We claim that we want a government of action that fights for working families so that nations can develop and trade with each other instead of having forever wars. And we can break free from the world that's run by Wall Street and London and have innovation for everyone.
Siblings might support it.
Okay.
Because they're kind of...
This is a monument they built in Senegal for their struggle, for their freedom against the colonialism, when they broke free of colonialism. And they made a monument in Senegal for their independence. They supported the Black Panthers and Cuba. North Korea supported the Black Panthers in their struggle against the FBI and repression. So the economic system, World Economic Forum, they want you to live in a pod and eat bugs, right? Mm-hmm. And they want everyone to depopulate and degrow and hold back. But we understand that humans are creative and they want to grow. And despite all these wars, we have optimism. Mm-hmm. They call them dictators because they have an economic system that is not dominated by Wall Street. Are you going to school here?
I am, yeah.
What are you studying?
American Studies.
American Studies?
Yeah.
So what does that translate to in the real world?
History.
History. So you'd be a history teacher?
Probably not. I don't like academia anymore.
You've heard of Free Palestine, right? Everybody says Free Palestine. Well, they supported the Palestinian struggle against the imperialist globalist system. The ambassador of Palestine to North Korea and his wife were unable to conceive. And so what's really sweet is that Kim Il-sung sent a fertility expert to help them conceive. And that's their daughter, Jong-Il, which is named after another flower. And then this is about the Iran war. Democrats and Republicans are complicit. And
I agree.
The Greater Israel, we support a peace bridge across Russia and Alaska for development instead of war.
Awesome.
What's your name? The economic system that has broken free from Wall Street, we call it anti-imperialism. The economic system is globalism, imperialism, Wall Street, big banks that are waging all these wars to keep people down and keep it from developing like they're doing in West Africa right now. Yeah. But China broke free. They were controlled by the Japanese invaded, the British invaded. They broke free and they built 31,000 miles of high-speed rail. They have 5-year economic plans. What's happening to our bridges in America?
I don't know.
They're falling apart,
I didn't.
right? They're not investing. Right? In that bridge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The Kerch Bridge from Russia to Crimea, it's indestructible. No matter how much Ukraine tries to destroy it with bombs, it's indestructible. We advocate for building a peace bridge from Russia to Alaska. And that's what the peace talks have been about. And hopefully these peace talks will have fruit this time. This is a project that's been in the works for many, many, many years. Instead of war with Russia, we would have development poles all across Alaska and Russia, and that would build the economy and just amazing stuff. And we have workshops.
Stop you, but I consider myself politically neutral, and we are Bible students.
Oh.
We promote God's kingdom as the solution to the problems that we're seeing in the world, as far as governments fighting governments. We're all God's people, all across the globe.
Yeah.
And so we have a global brotherhood.
Oh,
we
yeah,
have people in every country
Yeah.
across the globe.
Yeah.
And so we promote that versus,
Yeah.
man's government, which
Yeah.
is so divided.
You're true. And part of that is we believe that God is the creator of all beings,
Yeah.
and that human beings have a creative spirit. We want to innovate, we want to create. And the economic system that's run by Wall Street is holding that back. They want everyone to degrow and depopulate and live in a pod and eat bugs. And we do promote the spiritual aspect of human growth. And we do believe that there is a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
And we want
And that no one race is better than another race.
exactly.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. You're right. And so we have a vision for America. We were outside the jail for Maduro, saying free Maduro. And when the siege on Palestine began, no jobs and schools for America, not weapons for Israel. So we want people to understand it's about the economic system. And we have a vision for America to just make it beautiful and everybody be able to get along. And we support countries that are breaking free of imperialism, globalism. So our founder has a vision for America that's bright and optimistic instead of all these wars. We want to partner with that system and have mass mobilization to rebuild the country, get all the unemployed, get all the troops home, build our bridges, build our schools, public ownership of natural resources so we can sell the timber and the gold and the oil on the market and invest in education and healthcare and public control of the banks. Right now we have a private bank called the Federal Reserve that lends money at interest. All these taxes are just going to the interest on the debt. And then Trump launched a $1.5 trillion for war, right? And because that's the only thing our economy is based on is war.
Yeah, we just sent all the money to go for the war, but then there's so many people in debt. There's so many people without homes, without food, and then there's little kids struggling.
Exactly, and that's because Wall Street owns our politics. And of course, the Zionist regime. We have a leader who has been around the world supporting anti-colonial, anti-imperial movements. He has spoken with Putin about the African People's Socialist Party. You remember Uhuru got raided and when Trump got raided, right? We support them. And he interviewed Ibrahim Raisi before he was mysteriously unalived. His family, Charles Finney, was a Christian pastor who was part of the mass movement of Christians against slavery. And so we're spreading a mission of hope. Instead of Wall Street that's holding back development and making all these countries poor, we want to ally with countries that are breaking free and break America free. You can, if you want to scan that, you can, or it's yeah.
Okay.
And we have a 4-point economic plan to rebuild America.
Yes, I have to run, but I'll definitely read
Yeah,
it. It's nice
yeah.
to meet you.
What's your name? In the end, everybody was very receptive to our economic plan, and they understood that Wall Street is holding us back, and they don't want these wars, and they do want development. Especially, we have all these kids that are studying and are going to be in debt for the rest of their lives, and they want to study, and they want to grow, and they want to learn, and that's what the human spirit is about. So it's been a great run.
All right. So shall we put on the closing music?
Yeah,
That
on
was
that
really
note, I think
good.
we can put on the closing music. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next
Caleb,
week.
I didn't know
every
you were
Tuesday at
related
10
to
p.m.
Charles Finney. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, we'll have to talk. You'll have to send me an email or something. We'll catch up. So here we go.
노동당의 전사를 빛나는 새승리 어서 가자 빨리 가자 천리만 타고서 창조와 혁신으로 세계적 권리가 이야차 조국통일 새 날이 밝아온다 이야차 노동당 깃발 따라 나아가자 이야차 노동당 깃발 따라 나가자
Have a good night, everybody.
Yep.